This conference will now be recorded.
So forth, you don't get to have a say or involvement in what's going on. So there's a website that I use to kind of keep me updated with what's going on. But a big thing they did is,
what's the framework and standards? You said one of the Excel is the standard.
usually a framework is kind of a structure that you use standard mandated. Okay, so that's how I think about it. And then regulations. So with ISO 27000, actually it's a group of these standards, and the one thing that you hear about is 20002. Well, 20002 was the control set, was recently outdated. Right? This new version came out early this year in the presentation on it at CIS Tampa. And because of that, it made a lot of kind of reorganized and updated and so forth. Now the other documents to be updated, which hopefully will be about this year and so forth. But the thing is that you know, we get kind of the results in this finish, but we don't really, as regular people, even in the info secretary, you know, we don't sit in the meeting, kind of say input or so forth. So it all sort of rolls back to that. I mean, one of these, you know, you can go over cost me $150 more. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Now compare that with the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is managed by NIST, which is part of the federal government. That's being funded by your taxes. So it's free. You want a copy, you give them the copy, but also they're going through updates. Now, the NIST cybersecurity framework currently is version 1.1. They're in the process of going to 2.0. And it's a very much more publicly available, you know, process in terms of they put up a hey, we're going to update it, give us your input. And when I say that you give us your input, give us your input, if you, as an average security person, want to give your input, you do something. They probably include it. I think the last go around, I sent in some comments and whatnot. So they've actually taken those comments that they received that want to be propagating this document, do that. And they're going to be going through probably over the next year or two, working on the things that we want to be involved in this whole process. So, you know, whereas, you know, you want to be involved in the process of it, one, do that to staff. I mean, they're going to have a virtual meeting, face-to-face meetings, face-to-face meetings in the past. So these are sort of the differences between how some of these standards get updated. But hopefully in the next probably 3 weeks, you know, Cyber 2.0 coming out and so forth. But this presentation is on the CIS Controls, and I would refer to these right to the hard copies. Because I'm sorry, I like hard copies. I don't like ebooks. So I print them out and I take them to an supply store and have them spiral out. So we're talking about what's called the CIS Controls version 8, which is the latest version, came out early last year. So for those who don't know me, my name is Michael Brown. I started off my career as CIS admin, moved into information security at Motorola, got let go when they downsized, became a security consultant for several years, which was good because it gave me a big exposure to a variety of companies, a variety of regulations, a variety of standards. And I had before with the Secretary Framework 27001, critical security controls, HIPAA, GDPR, and all the whole jollies. I left that now. I'm a security compliance director for a local company, and my focus is high trust and SOC 1 and 2. And now I'm kind of under, dealing with that. I'm trying to use the cybersecurity framework in our trying to CIS controls, like look at our program to see where we can have some improvements, better. Because our focus has been pretty much doing stuff to meet high trust, and I don't like that. I want a more risk-based approach to security. You want to know that you're doing the right things, not using them because some regulator, so to speak, says, oh, you can do this, you can do that. So this is kind of like, an introduction of what the controls are, as well as what I'm doing with them, to kind of show you that you could do something similar in your company. So kind of an intro of what this is all about, some history and background. We'll go into the controls themselves. We'll look at two of the main tools that they have available for you, CSAT and the RAM. And then this other thing called the community defense model, use some other resources in the training. So again, for those who know where the name of them are the CIS Controls. That's the official name. That's actually been the official name for 2 or 3 versions now. Most people call it the critical security controls. That's the old name, or they call it the SANS 20, the SANS Top 20, or 2 or 3 other variations. I even looked at my files. I've got every version going back to version 5. Started in like 2008. It's meant to be a best practices guideline for what they now call essential cyber hygiene. I'll get into more on that. Now, one thing is that it focuses on technical controls that are primarily automated. That's their big focus on these controls. Is they want them to be automated, so there's no human error, there's no, oh, so-and-so needs to be automated. They need to be automated, and they're more technical controls. So the thing is, people need to understand is they're not trying to create what I call an ISMS, security management system. They're not trying to create an entire security program. So it is not meant to compete with 27001 or Cyber Framework or FISMA or RMF or any of those. What it's meant is this is a starting point for organizations who maybe don't have a good program in place to address the basics and get them take care of the controller, and then they start moving into these other frameworks. When they created them, originally was called the Consistent Audit Guidelines. Some of the things they were looking for, they're trying to leverage things such as cyber defense and looking at high payoff areas. They want to make sure investments will focus on the highest threats. So let's not worry about the less important stuff. They're again big on using automation, and they were also the idea of consensus. So they wanted to get a broad input from security professionals in determining what these controls should be. Currently, it's managed by a group called CIS, Center for Internet Security. Hopefully, you guys have heard of this group. This group is a pretty interesting organization. I've been aware of it for quite a while. They've been around since 2000. And they are a community-driven nonprofit. They're meant to do, they're doing stuff to kind of keep the world safe, so to speak. Their funding comes from organizations sign up, which is nice in that if you want to make use of most of the resources, you can do so for free. Now, the caveat on that is that if you make use of this stuff within your own company, that's fine. But if you want to make use of their stuff and you're selling it as a service, well, you really need to be paying them because you get advantage of what they create. If you're like a consultant, type position where you're selling, or you're going to go and help a company with implementing this, then you really should be paying these guys for using these tools.
Yeah, organizational subscriptions too, like
yeah,
they have a subscription and basically anybody on the team
Yep. The two things they do is they do the CIS controls and the CIS benchmarks. That's why I heard about it. What the benchmarks are is they're a recommended standard for when you build an operating system that you build a secure operating system. Hopefully that's not an unusual thing that, sorry, when you go and install an operating system with Windows or Unix or what have you, it is not out of the box secure. You need to go in there and tweak it and change things, lock things down, services, and whatnot. Well, these benchmarks give you guidelines for what you should be doing. And not only do they have for operating systems, but they have things such as cloud environment, like AWS or Google Cloud or what have you, they have actually guidelines. What they also do is that when you're in the cloud environment, you want to build virtual machines in your environment, and so I was like, pick and choose what you want. You can purchase, instead of just the plain vanilla, oh, I want a virtual Unix system, or I want a virtual Windows, that you can get a CIS hard image for that from the get-go. They also house a couple of ISACs. ISACs are information sharing and analysis centers. These are nonprofit organizations that help different business sectors to keep themselves secure, sharing knowledge and information. For instance, they house what's called the multi-state, which is for state, local, and tribal governments, as well as the elections infrastructure ISAC. So, pretty interesting organization. I go there about every couple of days to see if they have the updated information and so forth. And they probably have a lot of other documents and so forth that I'll talk about. Brief history on the controls. Like I said, to start off is the Kansas Audit Guidelines from a group called the Center for Strategic and International Studies back in 2008. So they managed it for the first two versions, 1 and 2. Then they tossed it over to SANS, which I was surprised at. I was always the impression that SANS had done it from the get-go, and that's not the case as I understand it. So SANS managed it for a couple of versions, and they threw it over to this group called the Council on Cybersecurity, which really didn't do much, have a website to say, yeah, here it is. And then in shortly thereafter, this group merged with CIS. Honestly, that's been the best thing for it, because CIS has done a lot of work on the code, not just maybe, coming up with new versions, but improving it, creating a lot of extra tools and documents around it to make the CIS code much more useful. At least that's my opinion. So just a little quick thing, this is kind of the version 7, version 8. One of the biggest change in version 8 was it was called SANS 20, or the top 20, because there was 20 controls. But with version 8, they went to 18. And so what they did was they merged some, I think they dropped a few, and so forth to get it to 18. That was actually something that I wasn't too surprised, because they even had on a meeting on RSA, like they said, well, like, don't get, committed to 20. Which kind of took a hint that, they were probably thinking about reducing it from less than 20, so. And I've talked about controls, and I think I should talk a little bit more what it is, and I'm not sure that's something that everyone is clear about what a control is, especially those of us who come from a more technical background versus you coming from, have a mix like me, where I have to straddle client and security and deal with management. And I took some of these definitions from Wikipedia. So a control is basically, this is a business term. It's a function of management that helps check errors in order to take corrective actions. It's to make sure that the wrong thing doesn't happen. Think of it like in finance and banking, that make sure that, hey, you do certain things to ensure that the fraud doesn't occur, or anything inappropriate occurs. We, of course, so we're in InfoSec, we fall under IT. We're dealing with IT controls, which is part of internal controls. And that's things, these are actually done by a person or a system. Somebody had to emphasize that to people, because some people think that they're only technical, designed to ensure that business objectives are met. So this means that we're doing things like managing risk. We're also doing things like policies, procedures, practices, guidelines, as well as technical. I get kind of frustrated with that, because I've dealt with people when they ask me about, oh, what's my experience with control? And they're like, oh yeah, I can control the policy procedures. I get a cold shoulder, because this person doesn't understand that, yes, policies and procedures are controls, not just technical stuff, but controls. And you actually have to have both. These are some of the controls that here we talk about: corrective, detective, deterrent, directive, preventative. So corrective, basically fixes things, or make sure that things aren't done, like backup can be a corrective control. Detective basically warns that something happened. So an intrusion detection system is a detective control. Says, hey, something's happened, pay attention. That's a technical. A deterrent control basically kind of like deters people coming. So if you do something, you get a warning. Don't do that. Deterrent. Directive is things which is mandate behavior. That's policy. You know, don't do this, otherwise you're going to get in trouble. Or don't do this, otherwise you're going to fire your ass. That's a directive control. And preventive control, basically things that inhibit attempts to do something, such as, you know, encryption, access control. Oh, you want to get in there? Oh, you don't have permission. And we kind of preventing you from doing something that you didn't want to do. There's also compensating controls. These are alternate forms of control when something else doesn't work. So I dealt with this when I was in roll-up, where we had to maintain really old systems that we couldn't put antivirus on because the systems were so old that antivirus wouldn't run. But we had to have some way to protect them from malware. So what we had to do was we had to put in a blacklist, whitelist system, I think it was bit 9, in place to protect them because we couldn't do antivirus. So that was a compensating control. You know, our policy says you must have antivirus. We couldn't. So you don't just say like, oh, we can't throw up our hands. It's like, okay, we can't do antivirus, so we'll do this to compensate for that. Again, like I said, there's different types of controls. There's technical controls, which is what I think a lot of us deal with, things such as firewalls, encryption, antivirus, and so forth. But like I said, there's also non-technical controls, policies. There's also operation controls like physical control. People forget about that. A lot. That's a physical control. A camera, physical control. And even though most of our InfoSec, some almost have to worry about things like that. The thing is, you need both of them. So yes, you have firewalls, but you need to have policy to say you must have a firewall in place. Policy to say, like, okay, you got a firewall, so every 6 months you review the firewall. You know, you must, if you get a word from the firewall, you must take action. So these are some things that you have to have. That's why you have to have both. Okay, so getting into Control 8. As I was released in May 2021, there were 18 controls broken out into 153 what are called safeguards. And then they had these things called implementation groups, which organize those safeguards. And I'll talk more about that. That's really important. Now, the one thing that people think the controls on, which is kind of pedantic, is these are not really controls. These are more categories. The safeguards are truly the real controls. So yeah, you talk about there's 18 controls. No, there's really 153 controls in 18 categories. Whatever. These are the controls. You have things like inventory of assets and software, data protection, and so forth. So take a look at these. Or anything here to you strange? Like, well, why would that be? Why would that be important? Or not? Or feel that there's think that anything here is strange? Sorry. These are the 18 controls in the CIS controls. Do any of these here seem strange to you? Like, why is that there?
Well, you were saying people would say things and people in the security world training. Some people might not.
There's training. But let me ask this: do you think that the thing here is missing? I'm sorry. That would be more low level into it. So these are the high level categories with a lot of things inside it. So social engineering would be something you deal with in like email controls. But are there anything here that you feel is missing from this set of controls?
I don't think it's answered a little bit further, but I would say physical controls of like on-site premises security inspection.
Yeah. Well, the thing is again, the idea of this is these are essential controls. They're meant to be technical controls, which they're to be automated. So that's great, but if I was building a complete security program, there are things here that are missing. Well, I would say nothing. I would say third-party risk management. There's nothing here about managing your vendors and the risks that they provide. That's one. Another one thing about it is there's nothing here about physical security. Nothing here about locks, alarm codes, all that sort of stuff. So that's the second thing that's missing. There's also a whole aspect of these that I call the HR aspect of security, such as the onboarding and offboarding aspects. So you bring a person on board and you do background checks and all that sort of stuff. I talk about that you can't really automate that. Person is brought on board, you need to have a disciplinary policy process that hey, you need to follow rules and this sort of stuff. If you don't, then we punish you and whatever. And then when someone leaves, what do? You your account, you think that you bring it, give back your laptop, or keys, or badges, what have you. None of that's covered here because again, these are meant to be essential technical controls that be automated. So there's things that are about out. Again, not a ding on the CIS controls because what they're aiming for is the essential technical things that be automated. But it's important that people are creating a brand new security program out of scratch. They need to understand that this will only get them so far. And they need to take a look at whether it's in this updated framework or ISO 27001 or what have you to fill in the gap. So this is how now one thing also is on these controls, they organize it this way. So each control identifies how many safeguards there are and which one are in which implementation group. They give an overview of it. They'll explain why it's critical, give procedures and tools, and sometimes link with further guidance. Each safeguard is numbered. Basically it's 1.1, 1.2, and so forth. Doesn't go any deep, so there's no. You're never going to see a 1.1.3. It doesn't go that deep. So kind of make it simple. Each safeguard has a title and description. They will define an asset type for that safeguard. Is it devices, is it users, and so forth. They also give it what they call a security function, basically the old identify, detect, protect, respond, recovery from the framework. And they'll know which implementation group it's in. I'll show you some. I have some scans from the document so you can see what it looks like. This is all of them. So you can see what they do is they say okay, it's like here, data protection has 14 safeguards, 6 are in IG1, then they add a few more, so there's 12 total in IG2, and then all 14 in IG3. What's interesting is that some of them have none in IG level 1. I know penetration testing, which I think is kind of surprising, is none are in IG level 1, which kind of puzzling. I'll tell you what things about IG level are, but to me, it's like I think every organization should do penetration testing regardless of the size. But here they're almost saying if you're really, really small, okay, maybe you can't handle doing a pen test. Don't quite agree, but that's that. So I picked one to kind of show you what they look like. They have an interest. And but I wanted to show you one of them to get an idea. So this is 10. This will be a simple one to look at. So this is 10, which is malware defenses. So it has 7 safeguards. 3 are in IG1. The rest are in IG2, and that kind of covers for IG2 and 3. And basically what it tells you that is to prevent or control installation, spread, execution of malicious applications, code, or scripts. Pretty straightforward. I think most of us understand what antivirus is for. And these are the 7. 1, deploy and maintain AV software. Okay, that's pretty simple. Configure automatic signature updates. Hopefully people are doing that versus, oh, you're doing it manually or some nonsense like that. 4 and 5 are kind of weird because they're kind of in conflict, but basically they figured if you're an IG level 1 organization, don't bother doing auto run or removable media. But if you are an IG 2 level organization, do automatic scanning for removable media. I don't quite agree with that, but it is what it is. And then if you're IG level 2, which are big organization, you're doing things like anti-exploitation features and antivirus, centrally manage it, which hopefully most people are doing that, and using behavior-based AV software. You know, I know for myself, our company uses Sentinel-1. It does all this. So for me, if I was to score myself, my organization is doing all this. So we look really good. But it's pretty simple. And this is what it looks like. The screenshot directly from the book. This is what it showed you in the book. So not too much, except in the anti-exploitation feature, they actually recommended some free stuff like Microsoft Data Execution Prevention, Windows Defender Exploit Guard, and some Apple system. So, but this is what it looks like, where you have the asset types, as I said, the security function, and then they tell it, okay, which one's an IG1, which one's an IG2, which one are an IG3. Any question of what I've said so far?
Well, you're gonna, that looks like outsource that to whoever your suppliers and sign up for this credit check.
Well, that is put in place an antivirus department. It's all those are not, which we can. Thankfully, that's the one. That's all this. Like I worry about. I know in the old days, some of the stuff it was work that you had to make sure that it's always updating. You know, get configure things, make sure that's what is that thing. You just couldn't disable it, and you have to make sure that the agents will work. Now it's helping a lot. But again, that's also why you want to automate this, so that you're not, you and your staff are everything fixing stuff. Okay, talk about the implementation groups, and this is kind of an important thing that was done. This was actually rolled out in 7.1. And this goes back to kind of a more fundamental thing that I've seen with a lot of people, and this is where I saw, as a security consultant, is I go and work with the clients I dealt with, and at the end, I say like, okay, you're doing, pretty good, or, and I give them a list of things, okay, this is what you need to do in your environment. And the first thing I get back is, what do we do first? It doesn't matter if I gave them 3 things to do or 10 things. You're like, what do we do next? And certainly, if you were looking at, if you were someone in charge of a security program, and I gave you, here, do something with this, building out 100 safeguards. What do we do? And I hate to say it, but that's when I get really frustrated with a lot of security people. Is a lot of them, they don't quite kind of take a look at what they have in their environment and prioritize things to be able to take and make a good judgment. Like, okay, here's the things I have to do, and take a look at it and make a judgment like, okay, yeah, this is really important, but I don't have to worry about that. Ooh, this is really critical. It's like a lot of people just don't seem to have enough knowledge and experience to be able to do that themselves. And I hate to be a jerk about it, but they basically want someone to hold their hand and give them, the prioritize list. Okay, not just here's what you need to do, and like here's what you need to do, and oh, I got it done right from the part of like 1 to whatever. Work with you, so I think that you can get this done by this amount of time. They want the handhold, which is a frustrating. So that's why they developed the implementation groups. So if you don't look at these 153 safeguards, the application are prioritize for you to say, okay, yes, 153 of them, but These subsets are basic hybrid cycles. You need to do that. Yeah. Then once you get that, you can go to the next group, you can do the next one. So they did it in these three groups. They did this in subject to 1, and they did it such as, group 1 was for every country, every company, regardless of size. 2 was for if you're storing sensitive information, and then 3 was if you were really storing on a very sensitive information. And then they also took in consideration is difficulty and cost. So if something would be very, very difficult to do, very, very costly, let's not put that in group 1, let's put that in group 2 or 3. So that they've already kind of like set that up. So another thing that they had done in the older version that they dropped in 8 is they did this organization of the controls where they had the first 6 were called basic. So the idea was like, okay, yeah, just get the first 6 done, and then when you got the first 6 done, then you move here, and then you move here type thing. And then in 7.1, they kind of like had this plus the implementation group. So in the current version, this whole organization is gone. So it's only the implementation group that they use now. This is a little too wordy, so I might skip the next one. So the idea is probably better, is so they have the implementation groups, and they also kind of use these for different sizes of companies too. So group 1, that's your organization with limited resources and cybersecurity expertise available. This to me is like your mom and pop shops. The place that probably have like one guy that does all the IT, or they actually you probably outsource all the IT to some part-time guy or something like that. That's your implementation group 1 type. Type 2, this is the one with moderate resources and cybersecurity expertise. When I look at my company, I kind of place ourselves here, mainly because when I think of 3, this is a mature organization with significant resources and cybersecurity expertise. 3 is, well, like where I was at the world, we had like a whole department dealing with these fireworks. A whole department didn't do it that long. I had a whole, like 3 or 4 people who just dealt with antivirus. That's a level 3. Now, as I work through these with my company, I'm going to look at the things in group 3, but in terms of the company, we're not the target of 3. So that's part of how they organize this, is like, what is the company and what's the size of the company they accomplish? Why they kind of organize these things. So again, here's what they did was, like I said, IG1 is basic cyber hygiene. They have 56 safeguards. They then add more for 2 for a total of 74. Sorry, this is 74 additional ones. And then 3 adds 23. And again, 1 is meant to be basic hygiene, minimum standard. 2 is, dealing with more stuff, more complexity. And 3 are the ones that they talk about IT and security experts and so forth. As I'm working through this with, for my company, I'm kind of focusing to make sure we're doing pretty good at 2, but then I'm going to go further into 3 because you have PHI and PII. I want to make sure that we're secure. And essential cyber hygiene is what they're now talking about, and they actually have the document that you can download from them here on this. And what they did was they focused on just the IG1 items in here, but they also added tools and resources for the safeguards. To give you an idea, this is the shot from the mountain, because we looked at the malware and I want to show you what it shows you here. So there's only 3 that are in IG1, but then here's all the tools and resources. There's things such as, you have Bitdefender, antivirus-free. You have a group policy editor, using the benchmarks, and other things like that are all free tools that ties in and help you out. So it's meant to, hey, we're going to help you guys out, show you what you use to address this. The whole document. And I said you can download this for free from CIS. That's one thing I love. All the documents, by and large, are free. Okay. Any questions about this? None so far. I'm not hearing anything, so I don't know if I or that I have to do or what to do. Okay. Sorry? Okay.
Level 1, 2, 3. Most recent slide kind of correlating the data size of the business. That part of it. And then in the slide 40, kind of correlated to heightened sensitivity and stuff. They kind of something for the but I don't assuming that if you have, let's say you have I don't think that's people, but there are more satellites, right? Microsatellites, use that DoD, and so is it inclusive or technically?
Yeah, the is what's very deep. So if I look at the IT one, we have to say we're 2, but
So we kind of look at the two.
yeah, I'm sure pretty solid 1, 2, but then I'm sort of like 3 to see what are these. I think are important to do because of the sensitivity to do. That's the way I think that's the right way to do it. Yeah.
We're, spending on that and go sector confirm what's going on. And it's something that I'm selling to a client. What a project was moving forward, and the customer then wanted to go multiple layers deep in the supply chain of the different building blocks of the solution that we were selling. Wait, not even we were doing resale, but there are components that are building. So we needed ISO 27001, and then also we wanted to stop infection. But with even 27001, so we had it overall, it was unclear as every layer underneath the supporting vendor, and then like a layer deep of the vendor supporting their solution. Having across the board, I can manage. And is it yes.
I think my best example for the management, but then I'm show you my
yeah, so we can start with the change, yeah, and see if you're good at this level, but then your foundation underneath that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've also, one thing I've also liked with CIS Controls, they've had additional tools that you can use with the CIS Controls. One was called CSAT, and then it was called RAM. When I was looking at, I figured, okay, I'll just jump into both of them until I started looking at RAM, and I kind of back up the RAM and show you why. So we're more focused on CSAT. The CSAT is meant to be a self-assessment tool to assess where you're at for the controls and so forth, to see where the gaps are and so forth. Now, what CSAT is it's available in 2 versions. There's a free version, which you get by logging this into their system. If you're a CIS Security Suite member, you need a downloadable version. Well, we're not a Security Suite member yet, but we're using the online version, and I'll show you a screenshot of that. So this is what I've been kind of more focusing on, is going through and assessing my organization against it to see where we're doing things and so forth, where our gaps may be. And it might be a little bit tricky yet because I'm looking at a lot of this more technical stuff. So I know I'm going to spend some time talking with, my network admin and the VP gave IT and say, okay, what exactly are we doing technically to know where we stand? This is what the dashboard is. Of course, this is what I took the shot like earlier this week, so it looks a little bit better. So in case you guys can't see, I'm assessing ourselves against group 1 and 2 at this point. So what I have to do is I have to go into each one of the controls and give in information. And when I do so, it starts doing a spider web showing, how we do. So I haven't yet gone through every single one because I have to answer 4 things for each control, and I'll show you what that is. And what they also want us to do, which I'm not going to bother, because they submitted an assessment tool, is they actually want you to upload evidence. And I don't really upload evidence, it's just for me internally. I've got the freaking evidence, so I'm not going to do that, but I'm basically going to, kind of score ourselves.
If you did want that, what kind of stuff do you want?
Okay. When you're doing assessment, they want evidence. You have to hold place. That can be right. It could be screenshots, log files, it could be, I think over time, they want to here's a screenshot of like antivirus from 2 weeks ago, and everything good, and here's one, 3 months ago, it showed yes. Hey, what's your patent policy? Oh, it's inherited, okay, great. Get screenshot of your active directory. It shows me that the first user's telling. That's the first thing. And I still have to go through this with Microsoft 1 and 2. So, I can upload to them. What I did find to make my life a little bit easier was I found this. This is a free tool from a company called Audit Scripts, and it's an initial assessment tool. Basically it's a spreadsheet version of the CSAT to go and answer different questions. So I'm using this, which I'll then feed into the CSAT online. And what I want to use for this is that I can say, like this is not really scored well because it's all about network sound. So copy that. Hey, go answer these questions. Incorporated. But this is, this is going to help me make it more efficient, and then I'll feed it back in. What they do is that each safeguard is scored on 4 factors. One is about policy. Basically from, you don't have a policy to what you've got one that's written and approved. And then there's is the control implemented? Is it automated? Is it reported? And is it done so you're not done at all? Or is it partly? Or is it for some, most, all your systems? And as I've looked at our environment, because we actually have a mixed environment, we have Windows, we have Unix, is that we're not really doing everything on everything. We're doing antivirus for Windows systems, but we don't have enough Unix. Which means that when I enter this for antivirus, I can say it's all, I can say it's most. Because I'm on Unix, or I can say Linux. So that's their methodology, and of course, it's all scored, measured, and so forth. So this is where I'm at with using the controls. I'm not doing it, start doing our own internal assessment. And then what I want to use this for is going forward, we're expecting to do our own self-assessment internally, so I'm going to use this, get it in place, and then next year I will go through an update of it as part of our overall self-assessment, because we actually provide that to High Trust and Sovereign too. So real fun. Now the next one is RAM, and I heard looking at this, and then honestly I started backing off because it was more complex. Because it's much more complex. In fact, this is the RAM materials. It's actually for booklets because it's 4, and they have separate booklets each of implementation groups. This is more complex because it gets into, it goes beyond just a risk assessment into things such as, your risk profile and your posture and so forth like that. And it was developed by a company called Hallock, and they base on this thing called a duty of care risk assessment. The reason why they have the scale is it's being done for legal reasons. This gets outside of what the security book are dealing with, but for those of us who are dealing more, things that the legal side and the client side, where there is that expectation that we've done our due diligence to secure the environment, especially if how often we breach, and then you have to explain to someone like, every agency in this sort of stuff is like, yes, we did all we could to secure our environment. Like, oh, so you said we can prove that you did your due diligence for you this. Something that I'm not going to deal with, but something I had to consider for consultant. Some of the like that they breach, they have you for OCR. And they do a lot of scrutiny on you, follow the huge goals, and it's not fun. So that's where we're coming from with this tool. This is to help you assess yourself, and then it gets into more things that what be the monitor cost you went down. And you really your security posture, what you're doing. So once I started seeing some of that sort of stuff, I honestly have that cost. It is like I need to more engage with CEO, the other the VP of the company, kind of saying that. It's one thing to say like, yes, wherever you got the antivirus in place. There's another thing to say like, oh yeah, we're willing to take it. So we have all the knowledge what we could have for 2 or 3 days. I'm not in a position to say that. So this is something that goes a little bit beyond what I'm comfortable for doing at this point. So I think reports like your impact criteria and range of impact, like what is what would be an acceptable hit that your organization should take if you want to go down. What is your acceptance of risk? And developing what's called a risk register. These are things that I've had to deal with when I dealt with clients or the higher corporate executives, which is a little outside of my wheelhouse, my area of comfort. And what they want to do is they want to use this to demonstrate that you care if you were breached or if you were sued and so forth, and taking reasonable safeguards. I would hope that this tool does this. I don't know if I want to test it out. This was a shot from a presentation. They kind of did a comparison of this against like risk assessments like 27,000, risk IT and FAIR and so forth, and what they claim. And of course, this was kind of like scary. Well, this is high trust, and it's like, oh yeah, kind of care, but doesn't do anything else. And it's like, oh great, because that's what we're focused on is high trust. So I need to kind of get into this, but at this point, I'm not there yet. And these are sort of the other things they kind of show, which are like expectations and have you implemented and so forth and scored things and so forth. So that's something I'm working on, but I haven't gotten there. This is another document they did, which was the free defense model. Again, you can download for free. The current version is 2.0. And what they did was here, what they used data such as from like the Verizon VIR. They plugged it into against the MITRE attack, and they used version 8.1. I was surprised. I didn't realize that the MITRE attack has versions of it, and they're up to version 11. And they use it to validate or verify the values of the controls in IG1. And they use these top 5 attacks, malware, ransomware, and so forth, against how the IG level 1 controls will protect you versus all of them. So this document is meant to kind of show the value, the usefulness of the CIS controls. And as I said, there's other resources, and again, all these are free, which I think is great. They have a cloud companion, IoT companion. This is the newest one, is on privacy. That might have been for everyone across my company, because I do EHI, PII, privacy. Is it? I think I am the de facto. Yeah, I'm the de facto DPO of my company, so yeah, I have to worry about privacy. This, kind of answers kind of what you were saying. One thing they've also done, they've done mappings of the CIS controls to other frameworks. So this shows you with these different spreadsheets that, okay, you have PCI or whatever. You can say, oh, we put the CIS controls, great, you can map over to this, as well as, shows you, okay, if you done CIS controls, you go beyond that, you can address it. They actually have it for SOC 2 and 27001. In fact, it's more than just these. These are I kind of listed the ones that I'm really familiar with, but I looked at it recently.
How much visibility though is there in uniqueness for suppliers underneath, that and support
I think because capability of that basic stuff, they're pretty much most of it all in the other side. Because the other ones go beyond what's in control. These are like HR, third party risk management, all this other stuff is not in controls. Yeah. So that's why I knew that either a starting point, you should do, likely another one. Yeah. Again, how would you use the controls? I kind of do this, and how I'm using it is how I do it this way. Is again, if your company or organization does not have a security program, this to me is a good starting point. Versus, jump into 2001, framework, jump into this, it's basic stuff. So this can be automated, take care of the basic cyber types and like use it, get the important stuff. And once you find out that take care of something running as well, then you start looking into whatever framework that you need for whoever's demanding something. I can consider that one. Clients demand to certify that in the case. SOC 2 is a framework per se, but this is what you can have for SOC 2 and beyond it. So what I'm using it as to improve our program at my organization. I'm focusing on trying to get to IG2. I think that's where we're at, but I think going beyond that is important too. But then I'm using it for, the RAM and the CSAT as a self-assessment. We are actually expected to do our own self-assessment in our organization for high trust SOC 2, and the whole preference is paid, but we'll avoid the purpose. Really improve it, do a better job, put us in a better place. Are you here to do that? So that's how I'm looking at. So one thing I would do is I would say I go get that Audit Scripts tool. I was aware of some of them on it. It's free. I downloaded it. So I'm going to use that first. Feed that into CSAT. So I'm kind of comfortable with it, and then use that to feed it into RAM, and then probably try to point with CEO and some other VPs to kind of fill in some of the more esoteric stuff and so forth. And then we do an annual internal SRA Q1 of the year, and going forward, I will update these things as part of that process to have, kind of a better program. Training certification. SANS is the only one that I know that has any really training around it. They had this course, which is a 2-day course, SEC 440, CIS Controls, an introduction. There's this one here, which I would really want to go to this one because it's SEC 566, which is implementing auditing security frameworks and controls, because it doesn't just do the CIS control, but also gets into others. So I'd love to do this, and this one leads to the GCCC cert. I should be clear, no, there is no certification for being applied to the CIS control. It does not exist. Some people probably assume so, or what have you. No, it doesn't exist. And I don't know, because of the fact that CIS has done a good job of creating all these sort of materials that because, sorry, like hard copy books, people pick this up and we prove and so forth. One of the things is supply security from their CTO there. That means there aren't any other resources really from other organizations on the CIS control. I looked around, so no, there's no dummies guides, CIS controls. Some of the other security companies that will have a presentation, whatever, to say, oh, here's how you use the controls, and of course they're using it to kind of push the product and say, like, oh, and if you do our product, it will need all these different controls, all that sort of stuff. So, but I do think that they've done a great job putting out the materials and expect more. Because I was actually looking at my collection of materials in terms of what they produce in the version 6 and the version 7. Some of the stuff they kind of updated and brought over into 8, but there's some things that aren't quite there yet. So I don't know if they're going to do an update or just do something better. Honestly, every couple of days I go to the CIS website just to see if they got an update of some sort. They also do on the blog security issues and concerns and whatnot. So they're a really good resource to check out. I like going to them. So any questions?
You actually control all the CIS benchmarks.
Sorry.
How often do they follow? How often do they update?
I don't have a benchmark. When did they really go? Yeah, the benchmark for systems. So I think they have to benchmark with 11. So if they're an expert, what will update it? But that's only because they seem to be pretty good. They have an operating system that even have to run the cloud. The one for AWS, one for GCP, one for Azure. How they applied it was at AWS. We came up with our benchmark and one group was like, hey, we're doing this. Was that help them to say, like, hey, what we do is security environment.
Do they control the benchmarks go together or they're also?
They kind of told me to use together. There's something else I forgot. A partner I was talking about how we put that on updated and there's a different updated. One thing is with CIS, CIS communities. So if you want to get involved with updating, whether it's a benchmark or CIS control, you can do so. You don't have to be a paid member, or you probably don't have to pay secure suite, member to do that. You can join the CIS community with a voluntary gathering of the community to be able to get that bigger input, do that. And that's one that they've apparently done. I've been involved with myself, but that's where they come up with this information to update the benchmarks, update the CIS control, which is through the CIS community. Any one of you guys can.
Getting the benchmark that they controls we want to see on. I'm trying to understand the relationship between people.
Benchmark is meant to be how to list your office. The security CIS will be honest. It's a security network or email environment or anything like that. But it is that if you look at it, see the whole part of it, you can have security, but systems in your environment, which would be secure systems. So you want to use the benchmarks which are built a secure operating system.
And then you just do a check.
Yeah. The other thing that people don't realize, there's the benchmarks in the world because we didn't go like, oh, Windows NT was installed, we put it first. But no, we're going to install it, we're going to configure, we're going to lock things down, we don't need running. We're going to, the services and so forth, and install what we want, have a secure desktop or laptop. And so when we did that, we started with the benchmark for the first set of radio secure images, and we're going to tweak things one out, and you were putting things on top of that. I could do this, and this break prior systems. And so from that, we can have our secure images that we can build for our system.
Do you know the CIS RAM existed for the benchmarks? The benchmarks for the complement of that framework?
No, there's no, because the CIS, will take it wrong. They have to benchmark. Where the CIS control will either be run by SANS and then 2013 to merge CIS out of benchmark.
That's what CMU started.
No. The visitors of CIS, they were born. The organization, it was one of us, like, so the group that IT security. We never really learned about it. We would be a day for the website. You service similar stuff. Yeah. Now, here's a question about third party, the law, I've dealt with that myself, but we look at third party, a lot of times that's, okay, well, what we do with you, didn't have a secure environment or what have you. Now, those companies are like, okay, give us your SOC 2 report with your, I just looked at that certification, what have you, oh, yeah, they're done. You swallow that's how it was. I never have both sides.
In practice, say that you have the customer, end customer, then selling a software thing to end customer is primary vendor, and then primary vendor has supplier ABC. One of these ABC suppliers maybe doesn't have a great policy of they play someone up on the question is, could supplier ABC influence something, get access somehow to stuff that's inside a primary supplier?
That's what we're saying. Go beyond that. Okay, yeah, there's a SOC 2 report, but here's a question here, what you fill out. Well, we want you to agree or we want you to attest that you have done your due diligence. You didn't hear due diligence. Your diligence, so waterfall, really down to the lower levels. But I don't know where, give the questionnaire and fill out that you're dealing with people below you. So even with the SOC 2 report, they often have to report in the SOC 2 report. These are our vendors that we're dealing with. Right? Who we're dealing with, and in some cases, those are need to like, okay, this company, SOC 2 report, this company. And some people it's not. It's like, oh no, we're using this, AWS. We're using this system, this company, to do this, to do that, and so forth. So that's what I do with that myself. Or like vision and talking and report who our vendors below us were, so forth. If for that report,
You're saying that I don't have primary vendor in that scenario is SAC 2 and, 2021. That's not going to guarantee that,
Yeah, that's why sometimes some companies, it's not as level as like, you know, give it to people for, oh,